We built machines that can copy a file a billion times in a second, and we are still terrified of losing our data. Ancient scribes had none of that speed, and yet some of their work has outlived entire empires. This is the contradiction at the center of information survival. More copying power hasn't necessarily meant more security. Understanding why gets us to the real secret behind both scrolls and servers. Imagine civilization ended tomorrow. No warning, no war, just silence. What would still exist in 100 years? What would still exist in 2000? Most of what you own right now would be gone. Not destroyed exactly, just unreadable. Your photos live on a hard drive that fails, on average, within 3 to 5 years. Your documents are saved in formats that already require special software just to open files from the 1990s. Even the cloud, the thing we treat as permanent, depends on companies staying in business, servers staying powered, and systems staying maintained. This is the oldest problem in human history, and it has never been fully solved. How do you make information outlast the people who created it? It mattered to ancient civilizations because knowledge was the only thing standing between a society and starting over from zero. Laws, medicine, agriculture, religious texts. Lose them, and you don't just lose information, you lose generations of hard-won progress. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria is still treated as a tragedy today, not because of what we know was lost, but because of what we can never know was lost. It matters just as much now. Humanity generates more data in a single day than most ancient civilizations produced in centuries. And yet, permanence has not gotten easier. It has gotten harder, because now the threat isn't just fire or war. It's decay, obsolescence, and quiet, invisible failure. Preserving information was never really about writing it down. It was about surviving everything that comes after. In 1947, a shepherd searching for a lost goat in the cliffs near the Dead Sea threw a rock into a cave opening and heard something break. Inside were clay jars containing scrolls that had been sitting untouched for close to 2,000 years. What he'd stumbled onto would become one of the most important archaeological discoveries in modern history, a library preserved not by luck, but by design. The scrolls are widely believed to have belonged to a Jewish community at Qumran, often associated with a sect known as the Essenes. And what they did with their texts reveals a surprisingly advanced understanding of preservation, built centuries before anyone had a word for the concept. The first layer was material. Most of the scrolls were written on parchment, treated animal skin that resists decay far better than papyrus or paper. The ink itself was carbon-based, which doesn't fade or corrode the way iron-based inks do over time. The second layer was environment. The Judean desert is extremely dry, with low humidity and stable temperatures. That climate is almost perfectly hostile to the mold, bacteria, and moisture that destroy organic material. The scrolls weren't just written to last. They were placed somewhere that physically slowed down decay itself. The third layer, and the most important one, was distribution. The scrolls weren't kept in one location. They were sealed inside clay jars and hidden across roughly a dozen different caves scattered through the cliffs. If a flood, a fire, or a raid destroyed one cave, it wouldn't destroy the others. This wasn't a single clever trick. It was redundancy stacked on redundancy, durable material, protective environment, and physical separation, all working together. And notice what wasn't a priority: accessibility. Nobody was meant to casually walk in and read these scrolls. They were sealed away, hidden, and essentially locked out of daily use. That trade-off is the key detail. The Qumran community accepted a massive cost and convenience in exchange for a massive gain in durability. They weren't optimizing for the present. They were optimizing for a future they would never see. It worked. Fragments of these scrolls have survived roughly 2,000 years, making them the oldest known copies of large portions of the Hebrew Bible. No maintenance, no power source, no institution keeping watch over them the entire time. Just design choices made once, correctly, at the very beginning. Now walk into a modern data center. Rows of servers, humming under constant climate control, guarded, monitored, and backed by diesel generators in case the power grid fails. It looks nothing like a desert cave, but underneath the technology, it's solving the exact same problem with a strategy that would be instantly familiar to the people at Qumran. Cloud storage providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft don't store your data in one place. They replicate it. A single file you upload is typically copied across multiple servers, and often across multiple data centers located in entirely different geographic regions. This is a well-documented practice across major cloud providers, built specifically so that losing one server, or even one entire facility, doesn't mean losing the data. Underneath that replication is a more technical process called erasure coding, a method where a file is broken into pieces and reconstructed using mathematical redundancy, so that even if some pieces are lost, the original file can still be rebuilt. It's a more sophisticated version of the same principle as the scattered caves. Don't rely on any single copy surviving. Make sure enough copies exist that the loss of one, or several, doesn't matter. But here's where the comparison starts to bend. The ancient solution optimized almost entirely for durability. The modern solution has to optimize for durability and speed and accessibility all at the same time. You expect to open a file instantly, from anywhere, on any device, the moment you want it. That expectation didn't exist for a sealed scroll in a jar. Meeting that expectation requires constant, active maintenance. Servers need power around the clock. Hardware degrades and has to be replaced on a rolling basis, typically every 3 to 5 years. Software has to be updated to remain compatible with new systems. None of this happens passively. It requires a functioning institution, continuously making decisions, continuously spending money, continuously keeping the system alive. This is the dependency the Dead Sea Scrolls never had. Once sealed in their jars and hidden in their caves, they required nothing further from anyone. Cloud storage requires a company to keep existing, keep operating, and keep choosing to maintain the infrastructure indefinitely. So modern storage solved the accessibility problem that ancient preservation never had to deal with. But in doing so, it introduced a new vulnerability that dried animal skin in a sealed jar was never exposed to in the first place. Strip away the parchment and the servers, and both of these systems were built to answer the same 3 questions. First, how do you stop the physical medium itself from decaying? Second, how do you prevent one catastrophic event from wiping out everything at once? And third, how do you make sure the information can still be understood and retrieved long after the people who created it are gone? The scrolls answered all 3 with static, physical choices made at the outset: the right material, the right environment, the right kind of separation. Cloud storage answers the same 3 questions, but dynamically, using constant replication and active infrastructure instead of one-time decisions. Different tools, same underlying questions. And that's the first surprising thing here. 2 systems, separated by 2,000 years, with zero contact or shared knowledge, converged on nearly identical core strategies. Both rejected the idea of a single copy in a single location. The Qumran community spread their scrolls across roughly a dozen caves. Cloud providers spread data across multiple servers and multiple regions. In both cases, redundancy wasn't an added feature. It was the actual defense mechanism against permanent loss. Both systems also made a deliberate trade-off between accessibility and durability, just in opposite directions. The scrolls sacrificed convenience entirely in favor of long-term survival. Nobody was meant to access them casually. Cloud storage pushes hard in the other direction, prioritizing instant access, which means accepting more complexity and more potential points of failure in exchange for that convenience. And both systems depended on intent. Neither of these solutions happened by accident. Someone had to decide that preservation was worth the cost, whether that meant physically hiding jars in desert cliffs or building and continuously funding a global network of data centers. Preservation, in both cases, was a choice made by an institution, not a natural outcome. But the differences matter just as much as the similarities, because they reveal something that actually changed about how humans relate to information. The biggest difference is passive versus active preservation. The scrolls survived through inertness. Once sealed, they needed nothing else to happen. No one had to keep checking on them, powering them, or updating them. Cloud storage is the opposite. It only survives through continuous, active maintenance. Stop paying for electricity, stop replacing failing hardware, stop funding the institution behind it, and the data starts to disappear. This is not a hypothetical. It reflects how digital infrastructure is actually built and maintained across the industry. That leads to the second major difference: Institutional dependency. The scrolls didn't need Qumran to still exist in order to survive. In fact, the community itself is believed to have been destroyed around 68 AD, likely during the First Jewish-Roman War, and the scrolls outlasted them by nearly 2,000 years regardless. Cloud storage doesn't have that independence. If the company maintaining the servers collapses or simply chooses to shut down a service, the data can vanish, even if the hardware itself is technically fine. This exposes a pattern that goes far beyond scrolls and servers. Preservation systems don't usually fail from a lack of effort. They fail from over-optimizing for one kind of threat while leaving another one completely unguarded. The Library of Alexandria optimized for centralization and accessibility, gathering knowledge into one place to make it usable, and that same centralization made it catastrophically vulnerable to a single destructive event. Modern organizations make a smaller version of this same mistake constantly, keeping critical data on a single server or a single backup, optimizing for cost or convenience, until one failure wipes it out entirely. The systems that actually endure, across history and across technology, tend to share the same underlying traits: redundancy across independent points of failure, minimal reliance on any one institution or location surviving intact, and a clear-eyed trade-off between how easily something can be accessed and how long it's likely to last. This same pattern shows up far outside of information storage. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, built into a mountainside in the Arctic, stores duplicate seed samples specifically so that no single regional disaster, war, or crop failure can eliminate a species permanently. It's the exact same design logic as a cave full of scrolls, applied to biology instead of text. The Essenes never used the word redundancy. They didn't have the concept of erasure coding or geographic replication. But structurally, they built something that modern engineers would recognize immediately: a system where no single point of failure could take everything down at once. 2,000 years and a complete absence of shared technology weren't enough to stop two civilizations from arriving at the same solution, because the problem itself never actually changed. So here's the real question this leaves you with. Not about scrolls, not about servers, but about your own life. What's the one thing you have right now that only exists in a single place? A photo, a document, a piece of family history, a skill only one person knows. The Essenes didn't have the internet, and they still figured out redundancy was survival. We have the internet, and most of us still don't. Drop a comment. What's the one irreplaceable thing in your life that currently has zero backup? And after watching this, are you finally going to fix that?